Today I will be demonstrating how to colour dark skin tones using this design showing Isis and Baby Horus from Colouring Heaven Collection issue 43, Ancient Egypt by Fabiana Trere. I will be working with Prismacolor pencils and all the colours that I use are listed in the description box below. As I've said in previous tutorials, when you're trying to achieve a particular effect, it is a really good idea to find examples that you can use as inspiration. With portraits, you can use one that is at a similar angle to the face you are colouring, as it will help you work out the light source and where the shadow and highlights fall. So I found this image on Pixabay, which provides copyright-free images for artists to use without asking for permission. So I'm going to use this as the basis for the sort of skin tone that I'm aiming for. And it's also helpful to see I'm going to use my light source coming from a similar angle to this, which is basically from the front and the left. And this shows us that the lightest areas are going to be the forehead, the nose, the chin, the cheek, the brow and the top of the eye socket. And you can't actually see it in this photograph, but you'll also get a light area on the top of the eyelid. Now, looking at this design, the artist has put in a little bit of the shading to give us a head start. So we've got a bit there around the eye socket, as I said, leaving the brow and the eyelid lighter, and a little bit under the lip. And there's also a little bit here at the curve above the top lip. Now I'm going to start by taking my lightest colour, which is Seashell Pink, PC1093, and I'm going to use that to mark out where my light areas are going to be. So for the time being, I'm going to leave the very lightest areas uncoloured, but I'll come back at the end, put in a bit more colour. So I'm leaving this a light colour at the moment, or rather, I'm leaving it uncoloured at the moment. And I'm actually going to put this side of her face in shadow, as that's going to give more contrast and give a more three-dimensional effect. Then we're leaving this bit light, so I'm putting the shading here. When you're working on skin, you want to use light pressure and you want to work in very small circles so that you get a very even spread of colour. You want to avoid any streaks or lines. And we're going to have shadow here in the eye socket. So this part of the nose is going to be left uncoloured at the moment, whereas this bridge of the nose is turned away from the light, so that's going to be shaded. A little bit of shading here. So for the time being, I'm actually going to leave this whole section uncoloured. Then I'll come back to it when I've built up a bit more of the colours elsewhere. The cheekbone is going to be highlighted as well, so I'm going to work around that. I'm going to go in underneath her cheekbone. Really, if you think about it, shading a face is very much like contouring with makeup. you're following the shapes of the face and accentuating them. And then the point of the chin is going to remain uncoloured for the time being. And actually I'm going to leave a little light bit here as well. So I'm using this is called a drafting brush. This one's made by Faber-Castell. It's a very, very soft brush, and you can use it to just sweep away any loose bits of pigment you've got, or if you've used a rubber, you can get rid of all the bits of rubber. So I'm taking my next darkest shade now, which is Beige Sienna, PC1080. So what I'm really doing is I'm going to work from light to dark and then back from dark to light again. And I'm going to use this so I'm following on, I'm leaving the seashell pink around the light areas. I'm overlapping a little bit the seashell pink, and I'm filling the next area with this beige sienna. So use a gentle pressure, very small circular strokes to blend between the two colours so you get a nice smooth transition. And it's always best to leave more areas uncoloured to start with, because you can go back and fill them in later. Whereas if you put on too much colour, it's a lot more difficult to take it off again. Now I'm going to merge into this seashell pink. Let's get my seashell pink again. So this bit here is going to be shaded by her hair and her jewellery. So I'm just going to put in a bit of seashell pink and a beige sienna there. I'm putting a line of darker colour here to delineate her nose. And I'm merging that again into the seashell pink, then round under her cheekbone. Then we'd actually get a bit of shadow here, so I'll start with the seashell pink. So I'm actually going to do this whole area seashell pink, going right across to here and darker down here. And then a bit of shadow under her lip. The next shade I'm going to use is Burnt Ochre, PC943. This time I'm going to work right into, so this area is going to be dark because it's shadowed by her hair. So I'm working from the darkest area and then shading it into the beige sienna. So I'm still using very light pressure and small circles. Then down the side of her nose, under her eye. I actually need to put a little bit of the beige sienna in here. Right, now back with the burnt ochre. Into the eye sockets. Then round the nose, so under the nose, that's going to be in quite a lot of shadow. Gone a little bit too dark there, so I'm going to get my putty rubber. Now this is great, it looks like blue tack, but it's actually a rubber, and what you can do with this is, if you've put on a little bit too much pigment, if you dab at it with the putty rubber, it lifts it off the paper. The difference between that and an ordinary rubber is that an ordinary rubber kind of smears it off, whereas this just, you can, because it's squidgy, you can manipulate it into different shapes. So if you only wanted to lift off a little bit, you could make a little point and go like that. So I use that a lot. Then working my way round. Oh, actually I've gone a bit too much on there. As you add more of the darker shades, the light areas look even lighter than they did when you put them on. I mean, they look quite dark to start with, but now they're looking lighter and lighter. A bit under her eye there. Because eventually we'll be coming back and working more colour into them. But I find it's easiest to sort of creep up on it gradually. So I'll take that bit off. And the next colour I'm going to use is Sienna Brown. Again, I'm doing exactly the same thing. I'm starting in the shadows and I'm blending it into the burnt ochre. You want to keep using light pressure, otherwise if you're trying to build up a lot of layers and you press too hard, you're going to get a bit of a sort of claggy build-up of colour and it won't look smooth anymore. I think I need to do a little bit more blending here. In fact, I'm going to take off a little bit of that colour and then blend it with the seashell pink. Now I've got the framework of the shadows worked out, I'm actually going to now work a bit more in the light areas because they're now looking too light. So I'm just doing a bit more work with the seashell pink now, and I'm extending that colour to cover a lot more of the light area now that it's not going to get lost. And doing a bit more work on the edges so there's a nice smooth blend into the light area. Now one area that I've missed a bit is the dimple in her top lip. So I'm going to shade it with the seashell pink and work on that area of shadow with the burnt ochre. And then fill this area with the seashell pink. What I am doing is keeping a little line of very light colour around her top lip. So if you look in this photograph, you can see here that she's got a light line that just goes around her top lip there. So I'm going to keep that in my drawing. Now I need a bit of Sienna Brown here, and I'm going to put a little bit in the creases on her eyelid. So the next shade is the next darkest shade, which is Chestnut, which is PC1081. And I'm also going to keep hold of the Sienna brown and the burnt ochre as well, because I might add a little bit with them too. So what I'm going to start doing with the chestnut is building up the fact that there's a bit more of a shadow underneath her cheekbone. And then I'm going to extend using the burnt ochre. I'm just extending the shadowed areas a little bit. So I'm using a very light pressure indeed here. But what we've done by building up the layers is, because I've put the seashell pink on first, before I've put, or I'm covering it up now with the burnt ochre, I can get a much lighter touch with the burnt ochre when it's already going on to the seashell pink, rather than if it was going straight onto the paper, which is why we build up layers like this. It enables you to get much more subtle shading. Make this part of her nose a little bit darker. Right, just put a few lines in on this eyelid as well. There, we've got a nice smooth covering of colour there. I'm just going to put a little bit more chestnut. There, and now I'm going to use my darkest shade, which is going to be Dark Umber PC946. And I might also put in a bit of dark brown PC946 as well. So I'm going to put the dark umber, so this is where we're going to really get into the darker shadows. So I'm putting dark umber into this area here where it's going to be shadowed by her hair, and also if we look at the photograph, here we go, we get the darker shadow all the way around the jawline. The dark brown is a slightly lighter shade, so I'm going to use it to do a little bit of blending. There we go. And I'm going to use the dark brown here, so I'm going to have an area of shadow here and an area here, but I'm going to leave this just a little bit lighter to show the shadow under her cheekbone. Then the bit right under her hairline, I'm using the dark umber. Back to the dark brown. Dark umber for the shadow on this side of her face. And again, because we're putting the dark colour on top of the lighter shades of brown, you can get a much better blend and a much lighter touch on the dark colour than if you were putting it straight onto white paper. Then I'm going to really darken up the bit underneath her bottom lip. And the bit along her nose. I'm going to put in a bit of chestnut here to improve the blending. Then dark umber for this very darkest shadow under her nose and into her nostril. So this is dark umber again. A bit into her eye socket here. This is going to be very shadowed. Actually, perhaps I'll do that with the dark brown. I don't want to go too dark. And a little bit darker just there. It's going to be dark going into the hair. There, we're nearly there with the shading. So I think I've done enough with the dark browns. Perhaps I'll put a little bit more in here. I'm just going to take my sienna brown, burnt ochre and chestnut, just even up any bits where the colour has got a little bit unbalanced, like here. Then I'm going to put a little bit of shadow, or a little bit of a darker shade, just around the edges of her hair. Bit of a sharp line there, so I'm just going to blend that in a little bit more. Then take the Seashell pink and the, if I can find it, the beige sienna. Oh, there it is, which has disappeared, and just go over the light bits one more time, and then that'll be the face done, and then we'll look at we'll do the neck, the eyes and the lips. Again, at this stage, with the light shades, you can go over some of the browns because it just helps blending it all together. Do the light areas here. And am I missing anything more? There we go. Right, I must stop now, otherwise I'll keep going forever. So just do the neck, which doesn't need such a complicated process of shading. So I'm going to put a bit of light in at the base of the neck, but then the rest is going to be fairly dark shades. So burnt ochre. You can actually see the difference here. So this is what happens if I put the burnt ochre straight onto the white paper, but when I use the same pressure and I've got the seashell pink underneath, you get a much lighter tone, which means that you can blend much more easily. Then I think I'm going to go straight from the burnt ochre to the chestnut. And again, you can see here, where I put the chestnut straight onto the white paper, I'm getting a much darker tone than when I use the same pressure on top of the burnt ochre. Then quite a lot of this area under the neck, under the chin, is going to be dark umber, because there's really going to be a lot of shadow under here. Bit more burnt ochre there. This is looking a little bit uneven, so I'm going to use a blender. This is a Prismacolor blender. It is a colourless pencil. I think it must be slightly rough. What it does is you can use it to mix the colours together. It's best to rub it on a piece of paper first in case you've been using it for a different colour previously, otherwise it can leave a smear. Oh, so there we go, look, it's mixing those colours together nicely. I'll do a bit on the rest of the face as well. Now when you're trying to do subtle shading like this, I don't recommend using the alcohol blenders because they can mix the colours together too much, so that you then lose some of the subtle effects that you've got. There we go, it just smooths out some of your, if you've got any slightly rough transitions. And I think I just need a little bit more of a colour blend here. And then in this deep shadow, I'm actually going to put just a little bit of black. then another go with the blender. There we go. Because what you want to do here is the darkest shades tend to look further away from the eye, the lighter shades come forwards. So because the neck here is further away from the viewer than, for example, the chin and the jaw, by making it that bit darker, you've made it recede into the background, which then makes the face come forward, and it makes the whole drawing look more three-dimensional. To finish off, I'm going to do the eyes and the lips and the eyebrows. So starting with the eyes, I'm going to use the black pencil, which just needs a bit of a sharpen. I'm just going to turn the paper round, and I'm going to put black. I'm going to give her eye makeup here. It's going to be black. I'm going to bring that across the lid, and I'm also going to give her black eyelashes. I'm going to do the same thing on this side. Then turn it back round, and we want to do black under her eye as well, and on the other side. Then for her irises, I'm going to start by putting in a bit of a light colour, which is goldenrod PC 1034. I know you can't see very much of her iris, but what I usually do with eyes is I like to put in a light colour first, then take a darker shade. So here I'm going to use the dark umber, and then go around the edge of the iris in the dark shade and put in lines that you get. If you look at your iris, you'll see you've got lines. Then take the black and fill in the pupils, and a bit of black around the edge of the iris there. Carry on her eyelash line a bit further. Then I'm going to use 30% warm grey, PC 1052, and I'm going to put a bit of shading. People do actually have a bit of shading in the white part of their eyeballs. It's not completely white. If it's in shadow, which it often is because of your eyelashes and your lids, it's actually going to have a grey shade rather than white. Then for the corners of her eye, I'm going to make those pink. I'm using pink, PC 929. So I'm putting a bit of pink in here. There we go. Now eyebrows, I'm going to start, I'm using directional strokes here for the eyebrows. I'm actually starting by putting in a few lines of the burnt ochre to tie in with her skin colour, because unless you've got very thick eyebrows, you do often get a little bit of your skin colour showing through. Then I'm going to use the dark umber to mark in the hairs. And then I'm going to go over that with some black. Got a few bits of pigment there, so just brush them off. Go over again with the burnt ochre, make sure I haven't got any gaps. And then I'm going to finish off by looking at the lips. Now, starting with the teeth, like eyeballs, teeth aren't just white, so I'm going to shadow with the 30% warm grey again. I'm going to put a bit of shadow in between the teeth, very lightly, and where the teeth are shaded by the lips. Then with the lips, I'm going to start pink. If you look at the lips in the source photograph, I've got pink here and then a darker tone around the edges. So I'm putting in pink here. And when you're shading lips, you can use short directional lines, because if you look at your lips in the mirror, you've got a lot of wrinkles and lines in your lips. The other thing that you need to remember is, actually I'm going to take off a little bit of this, is that you can have an area of shine on the bottom and a bit on the top lip as well. So for the darker area, I'm using a colour called Rosy Beige, which is PC1019, which is a pinky shade but a lot less bright. And I'm using these vertical lines to follow the shape of the lips. Then I'm taking Clay Rose, which is a similar shade, only a bit darker, and I'm going around the bottom of the lip with that, around the inside of the lip here. And now I'm taking Raspberry, PC1030, and I'm just going around the edges with this sort of more maroony tone. Again, putting in some lines. Actually, that's a little bit dark, so brighten up this with a blush pink. Then I'm actually going to use the Chestnut to put a little bit more shadow in around the edge of her lips. Put a few lines in. Then accentuate the shiny part a little bit more by lifting out a bit more colour. Going a bit more into the corner here. Now I'm just going to put in a few finishing touches. That's the lips done. Bits that I've noticed as I've been going on that I've missed. One bit being that she would have a bit of shadow here at the corner of her mouth. And also a bit of shadow going in there along her lip line. And and a little bit more darkness underneath her bottom lip here. And I'm just going to put a bit more dark along the edge of her nose so that it'll look more three-dimensional. And then this bit here is still looking a little bit too light, so I'm going to go over it with the Seashell pink. And there, all finished. I hope you've enjoyed this video. We will be covering darker skin tones in another video. Don't forget to like, subscribe and hit the bell so that you don't miss out on these future videos.